Alright, in this video we're going to continue going over parametric equations, and in this one we're going to talk about eliminating the parameter. So basically we're going to take a parametric equation which has t and turn it into a rectangular equation which does not have t. Alright, so here's your kind of rules. Alright, we know that our equations are going to have the parameter t, which stands for time. And eliminating the parameter is the process of getting rid of t in both equations and rewriting y in terms of x. So here's your three-step process. Number one, pick the simplest formula and solve for t. Step two, plug in this expression for t into the other formula. And then step three, we're going to have to restrict the domain. Alright, step three, we're going to have to restrict the domain. Alright, so go ahead and write that down. Pause the video if you need to. Alright, so we're going to start out with a fairly simple example, and we're going to eliminate t. Alright, so step one. Oops. So step one. We need to pick the simplest formula and solve for t. Well, that's the simplest formula right there. X equals t. To solve for t, all you gotta do is turn it around. So technically, we're already solved for t, so there we're done. Step two, we want to plug this expression into t into the other formula. So basically, we're gonna take y equals, now since we know that t equals x, we're gonna take x and plug it in for t, and then of course square it because it's t squared. So this here is half of our answer. Alright, that's only half your answer. Because remember, step three is to restrict your domain. To restrict your domain, you need to look at how x changes for t equals 0 and t equals 1. And you go back up to your original equation up here. All right, so for this equation at t equals 0, if we plug in a 0 for t, we get 0. And then we're going to go to t equals 1. So if we plug in a 1, of course we get a 1 out as well. All right, so x equals 0 here, x equals 1 here. Now, since going from t equals 0 to t equals 1, the value for x is getting bigger, okay, that means x for your domain is going to be greater than or equal to, okay? Since it's getting bigger going from t equals 0 to t equals 1, the value for x is physically getting larger. X is going to be greater than or equal to, and it's always going to be what number that you get when you plug in 0 for t. So for this one, your domain is x is greater than or equal to 0. That is the other half of your answer to give you your full answer. All right. Let's look at a different one. Okay, let's look at a different one. Let's eliminate t. All right, so the first thing you want to do, pick the simplest equation. All right, step one, pick the simplest. Well, x equals, that's supposed to be the square root of t right there. X equals t plus 1. Well, if we just simply subtract 1 from both sides, we get t equals x minus 1. So that's the simplest one right there. All right. So now step 2 is to plug x minus 1 in for t in the other equation. So since our other equation is y equals the square root of t, we're simply going to substitute in x minus 1. So here's the first half of our answer. Y equals the square root of x minus 1. Now I'm going to do step 3 over here so I can write my other half of my answer below here. We need to restrict our domain. So we need to look at what x equals when t equals 0. And then we need to go to t equals 1 and see what x equals as well. If it gets bigger, x is greater than or equal to. If it gets smaller, x is less than or equal to. All right, so if we put in a 0 for t, we get 0 plus 1, so this is 1. If we put in a 1 for t, we get 1 plus 1, which is 2, so this is 2. So we're getting bigger, so which means that x is going to be greater than or equal to, and remember, it will always start with that number. Whatever number you get for x when you plug in t equals 0 is what number you're going to write right there. So there's your answer. You have y equals the square root of x minus 1 is your new equation, and then x is greater than or equal to 1 is your restricted domain. All right? Go ahead and eliminate t in this one. Pause the video and figure this one out. All right. So, first step, pick the simplest one and solve for t. So, doesn't really matter. We can pick the first one. We can pick the second one. But if you notice, we're going to have fractions with both of them. Okay? We're going to have fractions with both of them. So, I'm going to show you. I know I had you do this one. And if you did it the other way, that's fine. It's great practice. But I'm also going to use this example now to show you a slightly different way to solve these. Okay? A slightly different way to solve these. Well, if we want to eliminate t, and we treat this as a system of equations, all we need to do is get the same value in front of t, just one positive and one negative. So if we multiply the top here by 5, multiply the bottom here by negative 2, we're going to get 5x equals 10t minus 15, and we're going to get negative 2y equals negative 10t minus 8. All right, so now if you add, of course, this just becomes 5x minus 2y. That cancels. So this equals negative 23. Okay, so that equals negative 23. So now you can really skip step 2 because not only did we eliminate our parameter, we also have our new equation because we can solve this for y equals. So we can solve it for y in terms of x. But if you want to treat them as a system of equations, this is a way to treat them as a system of equations and basically cut out step 2. You do step 1, you eliminate t using your system, and then you have your equation. You're done. You can move straight on to step 3. All right, you can move straight on to step 3, which is restricting your domain. So we have to figure out what x equals when t equals 0, and then when t equals 1, what does x equal? So if we plug in a 0, this becomes 0, so we get x equals negative 3. If we plug in a 1, we get 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. Negative 3 to negative 1, x is getting bigger. So we know x is greater than or equal to, and then negative 3. All right, so I've showed you 2 different ways now to eliminate the parameter t, and I've showed you and also how to restrict your domain. The important thing to remember here is the 3-step process, unless you're going to solve using the system of equations method. Number 1 is remember pick the simplest formula and solve for t. Step 2 is plug in this expression for t in the other formula. And then step 3, restrict your domain. All right, always use t equals 0 and t equals 1 to restrict your domain. Always plug them into the x equation. And if t gets bigger, then this is x is greater than or equal to. If x gets bigger, then this is x is greater than or equal to. If x gets smaller, this would be x is less than or equal to. And remember, whatever number you get when you plug in for t equals 0 is your starting number. And of course, you'll write that starting number right there. All right? So, feel free to watch this video as many times as you need to. Make sure when you come to class tomorrow, you're ready to work some problems. See you tomorrow.